How does David's song for Saul and Jonathan show his respect for God? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 1, verses 17 to 27. Before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 17. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 1, beginning at verse 17. Then David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son, and he told him to teach the children of Judah the song of the bow. Indeed, it is written in the book of Jasher, "The beauty of Israel is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew nor rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For the shield of the mighty is cast away there, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothe you in scarlet with luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished." In the last lesson, we had David learning of the death of Saul, and through it, his ascension as the new king of Israel. You might think that David would be happy with such news, but that was not David's reaction. He did not rejoice at the misfortune of those perceived to be his enemies, especially if those people were the Lord's anointed. Yes, David called on the Lord to deliver justice, but that doesn't mean he needed to delight in the demise of his fellow human beings, no matter who they are. That is why David had the Amalekite executed who claimed to kill Saul, for even David wouldn't lift up a hand against the Lord's anointed. That is what makes David's song here at the end of chapter 1 all the more amazing. David has spent upwards of 5, maybe even as long as 8 to 10 years running from Saul, only because Saul was jealous of David. For all intents and purposes, Saul was David's enemy, one who was disobeying God. And yet, even in death, David didn't rejoice. He mourned for Saul and wanted Israel to mourn him too. That's how much respect that David had for God, that even though God's anointed was acting ungodly, he was still God's anointed, and as such deserved the respect that came from that designation. And so we have this lamentation over the deaths of Saul and Jonathan written by David. This lamentation is essentially an elegy or a poem commemorative of the dead. So important was this lamentation that David wanted the children of Judah taught it, and it was written down in addition to here in the book of Jasher. Now we've run into the book of Jasher before in Joshua 10 verse 13. We don't have a copy of this book today, but it doesn't appear to have been inspired because it wasn't included in the Old Testament by the Hebrews. What this book could very well have been was a collection of odes of certain heroes of the theocracy with historical notices of their achievements interwoven in them. We do not need this book to understand this lamentation because we have its entirety here. The phrase, "how the mighty have fallen," is repeated 3 times in this song, showing us the contrast to how strong Saul and Jonathan were in this life, but even with this being true, it didn't prevent them from falling in war. The beauty of Israel is referring to King Saul, who has fallen from the high place of being king. Recalling back to 1 Samuel 9, we noted that Saul was a handsome man to behold, and so this description of him is only fitting physically here, but because he was the Lord's anointed, his office could be described this way too. The mighty fell at the hands of the Philistines, a fact that David didn't want Gath and Ashkelon, cities of the Philistines, to rejoice in, for that was an embarrassment to the nation of Israel who, if they had been faithful, should have easily defeated the Philistines. Yet this defeat is a reminder to Israel of the consequences that could come when they drifted away from following God. Due to Saul dying on Mount Gilboa, David figuratively calls for no dew or rain to fall on it, for nature should be lamenting for the death of the king. In life, Jonathan and Saul had been successful in battle, numerous times coming back victorious from their battles with the nations around about them. Jonathan was a skillful archer, while Saul was talented with the sword. He describes them as being swifter than eagles and stronger than lions in battle, meaning that they were very gifted warriors, able to defeat the most difficult of enemies. Even in their private lives, they were beloved and pleasant, showing us that war was not the only thing that these men were involved in. Now, when we think of King Saul, we often think of the man he became, not the one who was beloved and pleasant. But let's remember that this was the result of sin. Saul wasn't always that way, and David knew him before he was that way. And so David reminded us of that fact upon Saul's death. But even though all of this was true, that didn't stop the mighty from falling in battle together. And for that, the daughters of Israel were to lament for Saul, the one who not only protected them, but the one who brought them wealth as a result of the many victories that he won. But perhaps David's kindest words were reserved for Jonathan, his best friend. By rights, Jonathan should have been the next king of Israel, and yet Jonathan knew that he wouldn't be, but David would be instead. This could have led to rivalry, jealousy, and hatred, but it didn't. It led to a close, special friendship. A friendship that David said surpassed the love of women. Now I know some in the gay community would like to use this passage to say that David and Jonathan were sexually intimate with one another in order to justify their own relationships as right with God. But the passage teaches no such thing. Sadly, our society has equated love with sex, when in fact they are two different things. People can have sex with people they do not love, and people can love people whom they do not have sex with. And this platonic type of love can run deep, as familial love is an example. Homosexuality was an abomination to God according to Leviticus 18:22, and so God would not have accepted David if he engaged in such a relationship. And David wasn't engaging in such, but his love for Jonathan was real. And it was a closer relationship that David ever had experienced with his 3 wives thus far, even though that relationship with Jonathan was platonic. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, David lamented of Jonathan, and the weapons of war perished. Jonathan had fully expected to be at David's side when David ruled over Israel. And I expect David expected the same thing too. But alas, such was not to be. David would be king of Israel, but he would do so without his best friend Jonathan. What a fitting tribute upon the death of the Lord's anointed and upon the death of a close friend. But even though David was now king of Israel in God's eyes, that didn't make him so in all of Israel's eyes. We'll see how the transition went from King Saul to King David, beginning the Lord willing in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. We will be taking our 2-week winter break, and will return the Lord willing on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. When we return, we'll take up with 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 11, and we hope you'll come back and join us for that discussion when we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.